Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, and today I will be starting on the football side of the channel, and I'll be reporting on a local side of mine, which is Stoke City. I'm not too far away from Stoke, and obviously I'm not a Stoke City fan, that's the first thing I'll put out there, but I've always had a soft spot for Stoke really for the win in the Premier League era, because watching them in the last 10, 15 years in the Premier League, until they did unfortunately get relegated, you know, they had their critics of the football they played and, this mainly the style of play, but I actually always kind of enjoyed Stoke, and that says a lot. I mean, coming from an Arsenal fan, which, if any Stoke fans watch this video, I'm not a Stoke hater at all, even as an Arsenal fan. Yeah, I mean, I actually felt quite sad when Stoke got relegated. I remember the match when they lost 2-1 to Crystal Palace at the Bet365 Stadium. I watched it in a bar in Birmingham, and I remember feeling quite deflated, really, when Patrick Van Aanholt scored the winner. Because despite the trouble Stoke were in the last season Premier League, I never thought they'd get relegated. I thought they'd have enough to stay up with the quality that they had, but it just never seemed to click for them, unfortunately. And of course, Stoke were a Premier League team from August 2008 till May 2018, so nearly 10 years have been a Premier League side. So it was different to see them get relegated. And of course, Stoke did manage three consecutive ninth place finishes in 2013, 2014, 2014-15 and 15-16, where, to be fair, they played some of the best football Stoke probably played in the Premier League era. I mean, a lot of Stoke City fans aren't too big on Mark Hughes, but I think that the time he was there, he gives Stoke City some of the best memories, but he could probably overstay his welcome, and I do understand that, Stoke fans thought he was running them into the ground in the end of his tenure. But yeah, I mean, I thought that Stoke, of course, the most memorable probably being the 6-1 victory over Liverpool on the final day of the season. But had played some good football and got some big results in the Premier League era, and the Britannia Stadium, when it was a tough place to go to. As an Arsenal fan, I definitely knew that we had a terrible record at the Britannia. And yeah, the tough side to face, but I'm just, going to write on what's actually happened to Stoke in the last couple of years. I feel like it's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Really, the fact how far they have actually fallen, and hopefully they can again restart to regain their form in the Championship eventually, and yeah, and get back up to the Premier League. But of course, since Stoke even got relegated, it's not been easy for them. I mean, like first season finishing 16th, drawing 22 games, which is very nearly half of their games, only winning 11 and losing 13. I mean, a lot of people when Stoke got relegated tipped them to come straight back up, but soon as they faced Leeds on the opening day and were beaten 3-1, I watched that game, and it was quite easy to see, really, that Stoke could not afford to take the Championship for granted, and, they just never really adapted, and I think that, obviously, Gary Rowett, unfortunately, didn't work out in the first 6 months either. We will get to the managers later and how I think Stoke have gone through too many of them in the last few years. And, of course, this season, Stoke have pretty much been battling relegation from the off. I mean, they started the season terribly and, just didn't start clicking, really, and despite the fact they weren't playing too badly, they weren't getting any results, and it's only really recently they have started to pull away a little bit from the relegation zone. So I think Stoke, they will sort it out. I mean, this Michael O'Neill, I think, is starting to get the results, that's for sure, but I mean, at the moment, I think the focus of Stoke just got to be staying up this season more than anything. Of course, this begs the questions, what has gone wrong for Stoke overall? Of course, one of my biggest points when I look at Stoke is the lack of good strikers that they've had. I mean, I can't recall, maybe bar Peter Crouch and Ricardo Fuller, any good strikers I've ever seen Stoke have, and that has been a big Achilles heel. I think in the last few years, I've also gone through too many managers. I think it's about 6 now in about 3 years, so that's another issue. I think that, when you go through the managers, it's hard to get the stability, and I do believe that Michael O'Neill could remain in charge for a while, the way he's going and the fact he is improving. Not enough support in the transfer market. Now, of course, Stoke have signed some big-name players, don't get me wrong, likes of Shaqiri, Bojan, all which were big names when they signed them. But I think that in the last couple of years, especially, Stoke don't really seem to have been too supported in the transfer market. And I think that without the financial support, the way money is in football these days, it will be difficult for Stoke to, unless they do rely on the youth academy, it will be difficult for Stoke to move back up the ranks with the players they've got to feel like they have kept too much of the deadwood. Which brings me on to my next point, actually. Have Stoke kept too much of the deadwood players? I mean, players who aren't really good enough, or players who are on too much wages. I do certainly feel like the wage bill is an issue at Stoke. So maybe that's another reason as well, that maybe moving players on just to get more in would probably be the best way for them to go. I mean, any of these answers really wouldn't be an injustice as a Stoke, from a Stoke fan, if anyone thought this was the reason they have gone downhill in the last few years. Yeah, of course, Stoke just haven't been able to put a run. Michael O'Neill actually is their fifth manager in the last just over 2 years, which is actually, quite staggering, really, that a club can go through that many managers. I mean, that's pretty much been the issue with Stoke since 2018, of course, since sacking Mark Hughes. I mean, Hughes was in charge of Stoke for, I believe it was about 4.5 years. Hughes was at Stoke, 2013 he took over. And, yeah, I mean, obviously Paul Lambert took charge of the rest of the Premier League campaign. And he only won 2 games out of the last few games, which did let Stoke plummet to the Championship. Of course, Gary Rowett then took over, and Gary Rowett, I thought would be a manager who would be good to take Stoke back to the Premier League. Of course, he was very harshly sacked from Birmingham, and I thought he was a good appointment for Stoke, but again, that never really worked out, and there was a third-round exit against Shrewsbury, which was the final straw for him. And Nathan Jones as well, I mean, he was one that I think many Stoke fans would have wanted to work out for him, because he was very passionate, and you could really see how much he cared about the club. But it just never worked out. I mean, the performances weren't bad, but the results were certainly a struggle, and I think that was it for him in the end. But it's a shame it didn't work out for Jones, because I think he really cared about the club, and he only wanted what was best for Stoke, but it wasn't to be for him. Maybe the job was a bit too much for him at the time. Of course, Michael O'Neill's just taken over, and he's doing okay so far. I mean, the results aren't too bad for O'Neill. I mean, he's had a bit of a mixed record, but he's managing to guide Stoke away from relegation. He's done a terrific job at Northern Ireland, of course, but international football, as we know, is a lot different to club football. So, and of course, whatever support O'Neill gets in the transfer window in the summer, then I think that might be important, really, because I do feel like Jones never really got any support last summer. In fact, the club only spent about 5 or 6 million, which in this day and age it isn't much at all. So, definitely, I think that Stoke need to spend a bit more money and buy players who are Championship quality, that's for sure. I mean, Stoke actually spent 56 million the first year they got relegated, so of course they were supported that year, but a lot of that money was on players that, you think could work out, like James McLean, Tom Ince and Sam Vokes. Players who really should be at Championship quality but haven't really performed very much. I mean, McLean has been more impressive this season, but I mean, I think Stoke have spent money on players you'd think would be good enough, but they just haven't turned out to be good enough in the end for the Championship. Of course, pointing out the issue with Stoke City strikers, I mean, quite an amazing stat. Since 2014, Stoke have had 11 strikers who've played combined 418 games for the club and only managed 65 goals. I mean, that's a truly poor record for strikers. I mean, to have that many that haven't worked out. I mean, you've even had the likes of course, Real Madrid wonderkid Jesse came over and I think scored 1 goal for the club. Of course, you had Benicofobé in the Championship, who was known for his Championship goals, but he only managed, well, he's still at the club, technically he's on loan, but 8 goals in 46 games, which for, a striker of Benicofobé in the Championship is very poor, but it seems to be no matter what striker Stoke sign, they just can't seem to get anyone firing. I mean, they do sign strikers who don't have the worst ratios at other clubs, but as soon as they move to Stoke, something seems to go wrong. The only slight success they have had in the forward area was Marko Arnautovic when he played for the club, but he wasn't really an out-and-out number 9, he was just up there because they didn't really have a striker to fill the void. But it does make you wonder if Stoke did have a good striker in the years they had the likes of Shaqiri, Bojan. Would it have been a different story? Would Stoke have even been better than they already were? I mean, would they finish higher than 9th, or would they have got a European spot? I mean, obviously the issue is, the question coming from this is, what does need to change at Stoke and how do they end up in the top flight again? It's a difficult question to answer, of course, and I'm sure many Stoke fans would have a better view than I do watching their club week in, week out. But, I mean, most Stoke City fans I speak to seem to think that this is, that this is going to be a long time in the lower leagues of English football, but I guess we'll wait and see. A lot can change in the Championship in one season. Next season, Stoke could be battling for promotion, so you just never know, I guess. You just never know. And yeah, I mean, I hope Stoke City fans found this interesting. I guess and might be a lot of it might have been stuff they already know, but yeah, I mean, it's good to hopefully Stoke are back up soon. I mean, like I said, I was disappointed the day they got relegated, and let's hope they are back in the Premier League in the next few years, maybe. But we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.